Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. When a weak and discredited horse is forced to serve in World War I, a brave young man faces the enemy army to rescue his best friend. Today we will recap the story of the 2011 film, War Horse. In a small country town in England, Albert Narracott watches the horses in the field. Albert is completely obsessed by the animals, and slowly approaches them, offering an apple in exchange for their friendship. A while later, old Ted Narracott arrives at the village fair, and is prepared for the event, where a horse auction will take place, which brings together all the men in the vicinity. The farmer finds a horse and is interested in it at first sight. His friends warn him that the animal is a weak purebred foal and will not be good for plowing the field. But Ted doesn't care, because it is this horse that he wants, and when the auction starts, the man makes the first bid. He feuds with Lyons, a rich, arrogant guy who thinks he can buy everything with his money, and besides, he owns the farm where Ted and his family live. In the end, Ted wins the auction with a bid of 30 gold coins. However, everyone knows that the man will not have all this amount to acquire the animal. Because of his irresponsibility, the old farmer gets into trouble. His wife, Rose, is furious, because the horse costs all the rent money for the family home. The woman, stressed, makes it clear that she wants the horse off the farm, but will have no way of returning him before he is tamed. Ted is already an old man and has a bad leg, so he will not be able to train the horse. Then Albert, the Narracott's son, offers to train him. Albert is a young man with a passion for horses, so he gets closer and closer to the animal and gives him the name, Joey. The next day, the young man insists on teaching Joey the whistling technique, as this is how the indigenous people call their horses. The kid is hopeful, and by speaking while looking directly into the animal's eyes, Albert makes the horse understand. Then, as he whistles, his partner obeys. On the due date for the rent, Lyons collects payment for his farm. Ted doesn't have all the money to pay off the expense, but swears that his plantation will soon turn a profit. The patriarch completes by saying that he will use Joey to plow the field, but the collector does not believe in the horse's potential nor in the family's plan. Still, he decides to allow them to pay him in October. Albert asks the owner what the consequence will be if they don't fulfill the agreement, and the evil man says he will take everything, including Joey and the house. Ted is desperate to start planting, but the horse won't allow the farmer to put the plow in. Albert tries to talk, but his father is furious. The man prepares to sacrifice Joey, but his son calms him down and promises that they will get the field ready. Days later, the young man manages to connect with the horse. The animal still fears the plow, but its owner demonstrates in himself that the instrument will not hurt him. Ted, Lyons and others are together to assist Albert and Joey's efforts. The landowner takes the opportunity to mock the farmer. He says that besides having a sick leg, Albert's old father is nothing but an alcoholic. Everyone watches as Albert tries to talk to Joey, but the trouble starts when the young man becomes convinced that giving the horse a lash would be the best way out. As soon as he hits his companion, the animal takes off running and drags the young man across the field. Over time, several people from the small town gather to watch the young man's efforts to tame the horse. The hours pass and the rain comes. The animal is finished by fatigue, so Lyons takes the opportunity to continue being cruel to the Narracott. And to top it all off, the evil one decides that later this week he will stop by the farm to evict the family for good. Albert is desperate, but he still trusts Joey. Therefore, he insists that the horse make an effort, because everything depends on him. Then, as everyone is leaving, Rose and the young man's friend Andrew join in to assist the dynamic duo, who with great determination begin to plow the crop. After a long time, family and close friends go to the field to rescue Albert and Joey, who are exhausted. Rose then begins to treat the pair's injuries. They talk about Ted, and the son judges his father's alcoholism, but without knowing why he drinks so much. Rose explains that if Ted drinks, it is to forget his mistakes, and not just for pleasure. He served as a sergeant in the Imperial Cavalry in the Boer War and was a decorated soldier, but he still regrets his terrible deeds. So that is why he is so closed off and drowns his sorrows in alcohol. Rose shows him the medal and military pennant that Ted is hiding, but Albert decides to take it, promising that he will return it after he honors his father. The next day, Albert goes out riding, and ends up meeting David, the Lyons' son. The guy is going out with a girl, and they even bet on a car versus horse race. The girl is impressed by Albert and Joey, who manage to overtake the vehicle, but the young man discovers that his horse is not good with jumping, because he trips over a small wall, which knocks the duo into a ditch, giving the victory to David. At night, a storm hits the Narracott's thriving plantation, so all the turnips are destroyed. And the bad news did not stop, for the next day in the city, a military man announces that the bell is going to ring at 10 o'clock, because the war between England and Germany has begun. This would be the First World War. Some time later, Albert looks for Joey on the farm, but he has disappeared. The young man talks to his mother and instantly understands that his father was responsible for the animal's disappearance. Ted went to town in order to sell the horse to Captain Nichols. The man wants 40 coins for the horse, but Nichols intends to pay only 20. They negotiate and Ted makes it clear that it is the best horse he has ever seen, until Albert arrives and interrupts the two. The young man says that Joey would never serve for a combat mount, and he offers to serve in the war alongside his friend, because the horse would only obey him. However, Nichols is reluctant. After all, the horse was now his, and still makes it clear that Albert was too young to go to war. The military man adds that the young man's family needs this money and says he knows that the payment was too little for such a good horse. He then promises that he will take care of the animal and do his best to get Joey safely back to Albert. The military begins to leave, so Albert goes to Joey and swears to his partner that they will meet again, no matter what. After the oath, Albert presents Joey with his father's pennant, then they leave for war. At the English army base, the animal demonstrates just how rebellious he is. In the aftermath, the novice meets an experienced warhorse, Tockthorn, who is Major Jamie's mount. The soldiers prepare their horses for a military exercise, which will simulate their onslaught against the Germans. A race begins between the two rivals, and Tockthorn starts with an advantage, but Joey shows that he is fast and manages to overcome his opponent in the race. At the military base, Nichols wants to reassure Albert, so he writes a letter to the young man, which is accompanied by a drawing of Joey, because he wanted to show the young man that his horse looked great. The next day, the onslaught against the Germans begins. Nichols is worried, because the enemy has 600 soldiers, which is twice as many as his troops. However, the invasion gets off to a good start. The enemy soldiers are surprised by the cavalry, which storms the German camp furiously. They manage to knock out many of the opposing soldiers, who even try, but cannot escape. Nichols and Joey make a nice duo, so they manage to defeat some enemies through Nichols' sword. The invasion was going well, but the Germans managed to regroup in a nearby wood. They have high-caliber machine guns hidden in the vegetation, and begin to open fire on the English. Many cavalrymen are shot down, including Nichols, who ends up dying in combat. By contrast, Joey and Tockthorn are unharmed, but are captured by the enemy army. The commander orders the wounded horses to be sacrificed, and those that were unharmed would serve to carry loads to HQ, but if they could not bear the weight, they would also be eliminated. However, a young German soldier, Gunther, had taken a liking to the animals. He goes to his superior and proposes that the mounts be used to transport the wounded. The high-ranking military man agrees, so Gunther and his younger brother, Michael, prepare the horses for this function. They try to put the harness on Tockthorn, but the animal won't allow it. Then, clever Joey approaches and gestures to his companion, showing that it would not hurt him. Tockthorn then allows the military to put the harness around his neck, and Gunther acknowledges that Joey is a special, well-trained horse. While transporting the wounded, Gunther notices that Joey was carrying Ted's military pennant and, unknowingly, he picks it up and hides it. At the farm, the Narracott family friend arrives with Nichols' letter to Albert. The young man is excited to see that it was Captain Nichols' notebook. He rejoices at his friend's drawings, but his happiness is short-lived, for he soon discovers that Nichols had been shot down. The young man worries about Joey, since he was the captain's mount. So Albert decides to take action. Back in the war, the German military announces that they will send another platoon to the front line. Private Gunther will stay to take care of the horses and will be in charge of transporting the camp away from the enemies. But unfortunately, his younger brother, Michael, is selected to serve on the front lines. Gunther doesn't want his younger brother to take such a risk, but the little soldier says he has no choice. Hours pass and the platoon is on its way to the trenches, until Gunther shows up with Joey and Tockthorn. The soldier captures his brother and puts him on top of Tockthorn, then they both desert and run away from the other soldiers. They arrive at a small mill in the countryside and Michael worries, because besides fearing that his father will be disappointed, he says he was ready to fight. Hours later, at dawn, the brothers are awakened by the German soldiers who found them. They surprise the duo and capture Michael and Gunther, who soon after end up paying for the defection with their lives. The two have been slaughtered, but Tockthorn and Joey are still in the mill and are found by little Emily. She is a young orphan girl living with her grandfather, old Bonar, who lies to the girl to keep her from being terrified of the war. But Bonar does not fool Emily, who insists that her grandfather tell her the truth, for she knows that her parents disappeared in one of the battles of the war. While the girl complains, the old man takes everything in good humor and even surprises his granddaughter by stuffing a spoon with liquid in her mouth. Emily then negotiates with her grandfather, saying that if he tells the truth, she would show him the horses in the mill. Joey then becomes Francois, and Tockthorn is named Claude. Emily is a stubborn girl who decides to adopt them both, even against her grandfather's wishes. The girl decides that she should train both of them, and the first exercise is jumping. She tries hard, but Joey, or rather Francois, can't jump at all. In one of the training sessions, the military came to raid Emile's residence. The soldiers enter Bonar's farm, as they needed food and supplies for the front line. They loot not only the harvest, but also everything the two had. The men also noticed that the liquid that Bonar had given Emile was a type of medication, as the girl was suffering from an illness. Hours later, the military leave, but the trouble is not over. Emily reminds Bonar of his promise to tell her the truth on her birthday, and that this date is exactly the next day. Emile is sad and angry, because she thinks her grandfather is a coward for having allowed the Germans to take everything they had. The old grandfather does not disagree, on the contrary. He knows he has no guts, and confirms that the girl's parents were eliminated in the war. The elderly man explains to the inexperienced Emily that there are various forms of courage. He uses the carrier pigeons as an example, because they have to fly above all the chaos and cruelty of war without being able to look down, because they have to deliver the messages to the soldiers and then return home. Now, the young woman, who had disbelieved her grandfather, becomes emotional and silent. The next morning, Bonar prepares a surprise gift for his granddaughter. He gives her a saddle that was his mother's, so that the girl can ride her new horses. Emily prepares herself and chooses Francois as her mount. She climbs the hill with him, but breaks her agreement with her grandfather by delaying her return. So Bonar and Tockthorn decide to go see what has happened to the pair, only to witness the military cornering Emile and her horse. The men steal the two animals to be used to pull the artillery of war. Helpless to do anything, the granddaughter and grandfather let their horses go. In the German camp, Tockthorn, who was Claude, is now called Prince. The two are cared for by the soldier Friedrich. One of the German commanders orders Prince to be put to pull the cannons, but the horse was wounded and would not hold the weight. Before he was sacrificed, his friend, Joey, steps in and offers to pull the artillery in his companion's place. On the other side of the war, in the trenches of France, some soldiers are gathered together and one of them is Albert, who was fighting just to find Joey. Ironically, he is serving alongside his friend Andrew and David, who is now an officer. They are preparing to march against the enemy. In the middle of the conflict, David is hit by a bullet, but Albert manages to rescue the young man and get him to safety. Andrew had stayed in the trenches to shoot Allied soldiers fleeing the fighting, but instead of finishing off the deserters, he decides to run to fight in the trenches. The friends and the rest of the English soldiers manage to advance against the Germans. They storm the enemy trenches, but are surprised by toxic gas attacks. Albert manages to escape, but Andrew is not so lucky. On the other side of the war, Prince and Joey are marching with the Germans, but Prince is very down. Friedrich tries to take care of the beautiful black horse, but he can't take his injuries. Joey is distraught at the departure of his colleague, so the soldiers are forced to leave them behind because the enemy is approaching. A war tank appears and scares Joey, but the horse manages to escape. He runs across the battlefield and jumps desperately between the trenches. The animal runs all over the war zone and is lucky not to be hit by weapons. However, its impatience and lack of jumping skills were its problems. The fallen horse ends up tangled in the barbed wires scattered around the site and gets stuck. The other day, the English soldiers spot Joey. Some mistake him for a cow, but soon realize that he was a horse. Everyone tries to call the animal somehow, but nothing works, because the point was that the horse was stuck. Among all the British military, the only one brave enough to help him was Colin. The soldier goes to Joey and carries a white flag with him, showing that it was a moment of truce. When he approaches the horse, he sees that Peter, a German soldier, was also there to help. The two team up to free the animal and chat amicably, even though they are on opposite sides of the war. The pair manage to help Joey, but soon begin a conflict to see who would stay on the horse. They decide that they are going to cast lots, and on a coin toss, Colin is the winner. After winning the horse, Colin shakes Peter's hand. Although there are only 30 minutes left before the two fight, the military men greet each other and wish each other a good life. On the other side of the war, David and Albert are wounded but still alive. Albert is temporarily blinded by gas exposure, and fortunately, Colin was also at the field hospital to treat Joey's injuries. The problem is that the horse was badly injured, and with tetanus. Albert does not see the animal, but he finds out from a soldier that a miracle horse is in the hospital. The doctor insists that it would be best if Joey was sacrificed, because it was the best thing for him. Then, just as the brave horse is about to receive the mercy shot, he hears the unique whistle. After 4 years, after so many owners and so many battlefields, Albert and his faithful friend are reunited. Everyone doubts that the animal is the young man's horse, but the emotional soldier describes every part of his companion, including its white legs and the white spot on its forehead. The soldiers and doctors disbelieve it, but when they remove the clay from the animal's body, they realize that it was the horse that the young man had described in such detail. The hospital's chief physician determines and promises Albert that Joey would be treated the same as a soldier. After all, he was one too. The next day, after 4 years of war, a military man announces that the bell will ring at 11 o'clock, because the First World War will come to an end. The bell sounds and all the soldiers fallen in battle are remembered. All seemed well, until one of the leaders determines that all war horses are to be auctioned except those of the officers. Albert could do nothing. But when Joey was about to be taken to the auction, all the soldiers who knew the story of the miracle horse and its owner made a collection, and gathered the amount of 29 pounds, so that Albert could buy Joey. Minutes later, the auction begins. A wealthy butcher disputes Joey with the military, but in the end, neither of them wins. The winning bid was by Bonar, who appeared offering the final sum of 100 pounds for the horse. Later, Albert makes several appeals to the old man. He wants to buy the gentleman's horse, but Bonar has traveled for 3 days for the animal, as he was all that was left of a memory of his late granddaughter. Joey refuses to go, but Albert talks to his old companion. He tells the horse how lucky they are to have met and reunited, then hands the brave animal over to its new owner. Bonar sees the whole situation and shows Albert the pennant, asking if the young soldier recognized it. The young man immediately confirms, saying that the object belonged to his father's regiment. Bonar then returns not only the pennant, but Joey as well. He gives the horse back to its first owner, because he is sure that this is what his late granddaughter would do. Albert gets emotional and asks the gentleman the name of his granddaughter, and he replies that her name was Emily. On a beautiful sunset, Albert and Joey finally return to the house and the two of them meet Rose and Ted again. Albert approaches his father and returns the military pennant to old Ted. In the end, the family was finally reunited, so they hug, while the miraculous Joey is thrilled to see his family together again. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.